In his final years, William James, the man who taught the world how to think, was dying slowly. His heart was failing. He could barely walk, but he refused to stop living. He traveled to Europe searching for a cure, wrote letters full of hope and pain, and kept searching for the more in life even when his body gave up. Tonight, in part 28, his heartbreaking search for treatment in Europe, the quiet moments of reflection while staring at the sea, and the final strength that made him face death with courage. This is the end of Chapter 6. Stay until the end. His last reflections will give you the strength to face anything. James's final reflections: illness, determination, and his search for a more in life. As William James entered the last stage of his life, his health began to decline, but his mind remained active, questioning, and full of curiosity. Page 5 of Chapter 6 explores his final reflections, the struggles of his last years, his deep longing for truth, and his belief that human life is always connected to something more. These years were marked by physical weakness but extraordinary intellectual strength. James had always battled periods of illness, exhaustion, and depression. Even in his youth, he had struggled with nervous disorders and chronic pain. But in his final decade, these health issues became more severe. He developed heart problems and shortness of breath. Sometimes he could barely walk across a room without feeling pain. His hands shook and his energy faded quickly. Yet, despite these challenges, he continued writing, lecturing, and thinking about the deepest questions of life. His determination amazed his students, friends, and family. During this period, James became increasingly concerned with what he called the more, a sense that human life is not limited to the material world. This did not mean he blindly accepted supernatural claims. Instead, he believed that the full range of human experience suggests that there may be deeper levels of reality that science has not yet explained. He often described feeling a sense of presence, a feeling that life contains hidden depths. For him, this intuition was not a sign of religious dogma, but an invitation to keep searching. Even as his body weakened, James continued to explore these ideas. He wrote letters to colleagues discussing the limits of scientific knowledge. He asked whether the mind might connect to the world in ways not yet understood. He wondered if consciousness might survive death, not because he wanted comfort, but because he thought the question was philosophically important. He insisted that no one should claim certainty about such mysteries. Instead, he encouraged humility, openness, and curiosity. Throughout these years, James remained deeply interested in the psychology of religious experience. His correspondence shows that he still collected stories of mystical visions, sudden spiritual insights, and experiences of unity. He analyzed them with care. Although he did not claim they proved the existence of God, he believed they revealed powerful truths about the human mind. Such experiences showed that people often feel connected to a greater reality during moments of crisis, beauty, or silence. James thought these experiences should be studied, not ignored, because they reveal human possibilities that everyday life often hides. At the same time, James remained a passionate defender of individual freedom. He worried that modern society was becoming too mechanical, rigid, and controlled by institutions. He feared that science, if misunderstood, could become a tool for limiting human imagination. He argued that people must remain free to explore ideas, beliefs, and experiences on their own terms. This belief shaped his view of religion. He thought every person should have the liberty to find meaning in their own way, without being forced into a single system. One of the most meaningful aspects of James's final years was the love and support he received from his family. His wife, Alice Gibbons James, cared for him with great devotion. She read to him when he was too tired to hold a book. She helped him manage pain, organized his travel when he sought medical treatment in Europe, and protected his time so he could continue working. Their children also visited him often, bringing comfort and joy. To James, his family was a steady source of strength during his illness. In these years, James also reflected on his long career. He thought about his early training in medicine, his shift to psychology, and his later commitment to philosophy. He saw his life as a search for understanding and effort to bring together science, personal experience, and spiritual insight. He felt proud of his achievements, but also humble. He often said that he had not solved the great mysteries of life, but he had tried to ask better questions. One idea that became especially important to James during this time was the unfinished nature of truth. He believed that truth is not a fixed thing but a process. People discover truths by living, by making choices, and by facing challenges. New experiences can change what we think is true. New knowledge can reshape old ideas. Because the world is always changing, our understanding must also remain open and flexible. This dynamic view of truth gave James comfort. It allowed him to accept uncertainty without fear. James also spent much of his final years thinking about the value of effort. He believed that human life gains dignity when people struggle to improve themselves or help others. He admired individuals who fought against fear, weakness, or limitation. Even when success was not guaranteed, the act of trying mattered deeply. This idea helped him face his own illness. He knew he would not recover, but he continued working because he believed that effort itself had moral value. One of James's most touching qualities during his final years was his gratitude. Despite pain and fatigue, he remained thankful for the life he had lived. He expressed appreciation for his students, his colleagues, and the readers who found meaning in his books. He wrote letters full of warmth and kindness, even when it was difficult for him to hold a pen. He thanked his family for their care. He felt grateful for nature, for music, for friendship, and for the chance to think deeply about the mysteries of existence. In these years, James's writing became more reflective and personal. He no longer wrote with the energy of his youth, but his words carried greater depth. He spoke directly to the human condition, its struggles, its hopes, its fears, and its search for meaning. He believed that every person experiences moments of darkness, but also moments of light. These moments of light, he said, reveal that life contains a richness that cannot be measured by science alone. As James's health worsened, he prepared for the end of his life with calmness. He continued to think, to write, and to engage with others. He accepted his physical decline without bitterness. Instead, he focused on the ideas that had guided him: freedom, experience, pluralism, the will to believe, and the search for the more that lies beyond ordinary perception. His final reflections were full of compassion for humanity and deep respect for the mysteries of life. Although he knew his time was limited, James remained intellectually alive. His mind, even in pain, continued reaching outward toward truth, toward understanding, and toward the unseen depths of human experience. He did not claim to have final answers, but he believed that the search itself was meaningful. That belief became central to his legacy. Illness, travel for treatment, and James's last attempts to continue working. As William James moved deeper into his final years, his physical condition became more difficult, but his determination to continue living a meaningful intellectual life remained remarkably strong. Chapter 6 explores his search for medical treatment, his travels in hopes of improving his health, and the inner strength that helped him continue writing and thinking even when his body was failing. These years reveal a man whose dedication to truth and understanding never weakened, even in suffering. James's health problems had been building for decades. He had often complained of exhaustion, nervous strain, and irregular heartbeats. But around 1908, his condition worsened sharply. He experienced severe chest pain and shortness of breath, making ordinary activities difficult. Tasks that once came easily now cost him great effort. Climbing stairs left him breathless. Sitting at his desk for long periods became painful. Sometimes he was too weak to hold a pen steadily, yet he refused to give up his intellectual work. Doctors in the United States struggled to diagnose his illness with certainty. At the time, medical knowledge of heart disease was limited. Different doctors gave him different explanations, and treatments often brought little relief. James, who trusted science but also understood its limits, grew increasingly frustrated. He wanted clarity, not only to relieve his own suffering but also because he believed that facing truth honestly was essential for living a meaningful life. By 1909, James decided that he needed to seek medical help outside the United States. He had heard that European doctors, especially in Germany and Switzerland, were experimenting with new ideas for treating heart and circulatory conditions. Although travel was exhausting and risky, he hoped that these doctors might offer something more effective. His family supported the decision, even though they worried about the strain such a journey could place on his weakened body. The trip to Europe was difficult from the very beginning. James was already fragile, and the long sea voyage drained his energy. He spent much of the journey resting in his cabin, rising only for short walks on the deck. He often wrote brief notes describing his physical discomfort but also expressing admiration for the beauty of the sea. Even during suffering, he noticed the world with sensitivity, describing the color of the sky, the shape of the waves, and the peaceful rhythm of the ship's movement. When he arrived in London and later in France, he met with physicians who examined him carefully but could offer only limited help. Heart conditions at that time were poorly understood. Diagnostic tools such as electrocardiograms did not yet exist. Many doctors relied on observation, listening, and educated guesses. Although they offered medicine and rest, none could promise a cure. Still, James appreciated their efforts and remained polite and thoughtful, writing that the doctors treated him with kindness and respect. From France, James traveled to Germany, where he visited a well-known clinic specializing in new treatments. He hoped that German precision and scientific interest might lead to better results. The doctors there tried various methods, including special diets, massages, controlled exercise, and rest treatments. At times, James felt slight improvement, but the effect never lasted long. His notes from this period show a mixture of hope and disappointment. He tried to remain optimistic, but he also acknowledged that his body was steadily weakening. Despite his poor health, James continued to think deeply during these travels. He carried notebooks with him and wrote whenever his strength allowed. His writings were not long essays, but brief reflections, small thoughts that revealed his continuing interest in philosophy and human experience. He recorded observations about people he met in the clinics, often describing their courage, fear, or determination. He reflected on the meaning of suffering, saying that illness sometimes sharpens one's awareness of life's fragility and beauty. During this time, James also reflected on the nature of medical science. He admired the dedication of doctors but understood the limits of their knowledge. He believed that medicine, like all human endeavors, was a mixture of skill, judgment, and uncertainty. He did not blame physicians for failing to cure him. Instead, he saw their efforts as part of humanity's broader attempt to understand the world. and improve the human condition. This attitude reflected his lifelong belief in humility and respect for human effort. One of the most important aspects of James's final travels was the support of his family. His wife, Alice, accompanied him for part of the journey. She helped arrange appointments, handled practical matters, and offered emotional comfort. Her presence reassured him during moments of fear or exhaustion. In letters, James often expressed gratitude for her strength and patience. Their marriage, built on deep affection and mutual respect, remained a source of stability during a very uncertain time. Although the treatments in Germany brought only short-lived relief, James did not view the trip as a failure. He believed that seeking help, even when success was uncertain, was part of the human duty to act. His pragmatic philosophy taught him that the value of an action comes not only from its outcome, but also from the effort behind it. He felt that he had done what he could to extend his life and remain intellectually active. After several months in Europe, James realized that his condition would not improve. He felt weaker and travel became increasingly painful. He began planning his return to the United States. The journey home was even more difficult than the trip overseas. The ship's movement sometimes caused him sharp discomfort, but he bore it quietly. He found moments of peace in watching the ocean and reflecting on his life. He wrote that the vastness of the sea reminded him of the mystery of existence, something he had always tried to understand. Back home, James settled in New Hampshire, where the quiet landscape brought him comfort. He spent time sitting outdoors, breathing the fresh air, and enjoying the natural beauty. Even when too weak to write, he continued thinking, sometimes dictating his reflections to family members. Although he knew that his time was limited, he remained intellectually awake. He continued reading books on philosophy, psychology, science, and religion, always hungry for insight. During these final months, James experienced moments of deep calm. He accepted his condition with remarkable grace. He did not fear death in a dramatic sense, but he felt sadness at leaving his family and ending his work. Still, he believed that the search for truth continues beyond any single life. He often said that the world is richer and more mysterious than our minds can fully comprehend, and he hoped that the efforts of future thinkers would continue the work he had begun. In these last years, James's physical weakness contrasted sharply with his inner strength. His determination, humility, and compassion remained unchanged. He sought treatment with hope but accepted uncertainty with wisdom. His final travels, though painful, showed his refusal to surrender to despair. Instead, he continued living with curiosity, gratitude, and a profound respect for the human spirit. And when William James finally returned home from Europe, he knew his time was short. But he had one last message to leave the world. In part 29, the final part of chapter 6, you'll discover his last months of quiet reflection, the goodbye letter he wrote to his family, and the one sentence on his grave that still saves lives every day. Part 29 tomorrow, 8 p.m. sharp. Subscribe plus bell on. The end of chapter 6 is coming.